Welcome to Praxis Journeys, where we explore the paths of today's most influential leaders in education and the real-world strategies they're using to drive lasting change. I'm Vinay Ganti. In each episode, I sit down with the people shaping the future of our schools to talk candidly about the big issues: teacher recruitment, leadership, innovation, school culture, policy, and more. Whether you're an educator, administrator, or advocate, you'll find fresh ideas and actionable insights to inform your own journey and help students thrive. Let's dive in.
On today's episode, we sit down with Dr. Ingrida Barker, Superintendent of McDowell County Schools in West Virginia. She talks about growing up in Latvia with a lifelong passion for education and teaching and how it brought her to the United States and then ultimately as the leader of the district. She highlights the challenges faced by McDowell, especially amidst shrinking enrollments and county tax revenues, double whammy. But we also speak about some of the highlights and bright spots still possible, especially when focusing on what the students need most. We hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you again, Dr. Barker, for joining us today. Just love maybe for you to introduce yourself as to our listeners.
So my name is Ingrida Barker, and I'm the superintendent of McDowell County Schools in West Virginia.
Great. Many may already know this, but I'd love to start out with, your story and your journey to becoming a superintendent in West Virginia isn't necessarily a typical one. Do you mind just maybe giving us a little background of sort of where you grew up and sort of how you came into this?
So I'm originally from Latvia, and I got my public school education, my bachelor's degree in Latvia. I was majoring in English and French, and one of the things that I did quite often was just travel to practice my English because I was going to teach it to the children. And through my journeys, through my travels, I visited England and France and just a host of countries in Europe, but also worked in the United States a couple of summers. My first summer was in 1999 when I came as a camp counselor, and I worked in New Hampshire. I was actually working with children with disabilities, and we were integrating them into the Boy Scout camp activities, which to me, it was one of the most humbling experiences. I just learned so much from those children who have just so many obstacles to life, but at the same time, they have, I think, the most positive outlook at life and what they can do with it. And a couple of summers later, I came and we worked in Shenandoah National Park. And that's where I kind of met my then ex-husband, and we dated long distance. I went back to Latvia and actually taught there for a year. And when I came back, we got married, traveled around for a bit, and settled in West Virginia because that's where his parents lived. And I decided, well, I need to use my degree in teaching. So I applied for a job, and I became a teacher of English in the middle school. I went through my Praxis journey. I had to take Praxis 1 and Praxis MPLT and Praxis in English and Praxis in French. So I became certified in teaching English and French, which we kind of joked that McDowell County needed people so bad that they actually had Latvian teaching English. So for a few years, I was just on a permit because I was still working I was on a green card, but was working toward my path to citizenship. So as soon as I got my citizenship, I was able to obtain a license to teach. And throughout those years, because in West Virginia, you have to have 6 graduate hours every single year just to maintain your permit. And I knew that I would need to do that every year just because I was still not a citizen. So after a year, I decided, well, let's just pursue a master's degree since I have to keep my graduate work up. So I got my master's degree from West Virginia University, and it was in secondary education because that was my strong point. I liked grades 6 through 12 students, and I just worked to get more kind of knowledge to be more proficient as a teacher. And I was always an avid learner. I just love learning new things. And my next step was getting a certificate in administration. And when I got that, I stepped into the role of a curriculum supervisor at the high school that my middle school was feeding into. And after 4 years of that, I applied for a job as an assistant superintendent in the central office, and I got it. At the same time, I was working on my doctorate. So I was working on my education specialist degree in curriculum instruction and also my doctorate in educational leadership, which I received in 2016. Throughout my journey as an assistant superintendent, oversaw secondary education, worked with CTC, of course, also did the Title IX work and some of the investigations, which was not the fun part of the job. Duties as assigned, and explored pretty much quite a lot of aspects of working as an assistant superintendent. In my line of work as an assistant, I also did a lot of work with communities and schools because working in probably one of the poorest districts in the United States, we always joke that you have to make sure your Maslow's needs, hierarchy of needs is met before you actually start working on Bloom's taxonomy. So as a district, we worked a lot on just putting those wraparound supports for our children. And that's the work with communities and schools is just so tremendously important to me, just because we know if we don't get that, then we are not going to see that growth and achievement. In 2023, when our previous superintendent retired, the board appointed me to be their interim superintendent for the remainder of the year because it was February 1st that I assumed those duties. And July 1st, they appointed me as their district superintendent. So I am in my third full year of superintendency leading McDowell County Schools.
Very cool. Well, thank you for your commitment for staying here and for doing all the work you do. And you mentioned sort of McDowell County being one of the poorest districts in the country potentially. How you, even back when you were starting your career, that they were like excited to have a Latvian teach English because they were struggling with finding people. In some ways, I imagine that districts like McDowell were almost like we're foreshadowing like a future, right? When we're seeing now the teacher shortage being much more widespread and impacting districts all over the country, regardless of location and things of that nature. Can you mention, maybe paint us a little bit of a picture of what it was like when you were teaching? Like, how was it really hard to find new teachers even back when you first started? What steps was McDowell potentially trying to take to sort of address that?
So we have been seeing loss of enrollment since I started teaching in 2004. And with loss of enrollment and the county being where it is, very economically disadvantaged, the district could not rely on local taxes, on local levies to just ignore the problem, because as we know, with loss of student enrollment, a lot of state formulas are based on student enrollment. So if you lose students, you lose that funding. And as a district, we just could not afford to not react to the loss of state aid funding by just keeping everybody and anybody. So every year we go through a RIF and transfer process. And in the state of West Virginia, it's a very structured process. You can only do this at a certain time in a year. And like we always had to go back to that drawing table, and everybody you had to go through cuts every single year. Even when I was a teacher, we had these cuts. And when I was assistant superintendent, I actually got cut because we were losing that student enrollment. And I was able to get back into as a director because we still needed to have somebody over secondary education. But like everybody even in my office experienced cuts throughout their career. And the reason was because we wanted to make sure that the county does not go broke by sustaining those extra positions. And I'm not going to say that we needed all the positions that we had in place, because just the needs of the students are so great. But at the same time, long-term, county had to remain fiscally responsible and fiscally solvent and make sure they made those decisions with the future in mind. So that's the reality that a lot of counties are seeing now, because with the student population loss in pretty much all but maybe 2 counties in West Virginia, it becomes a stark reality for everybody. So everybody has to make those decisions, and you have to vacillate between, am I going to cut to the point that the schools are not being safe and students don't have those educational electives, they don't have those extra minutes in their schedule for specific interventions, especially in earlier grade? Or do I maintain that teaching force and eventually I cannot pay anybody just because I'm to the point that I'm going broke. And that's that stark reality that a lot of districts have to make decisions upon. And there are no winners in a situation just because we owe it to our students to provide, free appropriate public education and the system of efficient education. But at the same time, those financial constraints are really leading the counties to consider, do we choose financial stability or do we choose those really specific supports for our students that do require positions, that do require that human resource?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of the challenge must be incredible, especially because you're experiencing both a demographic decline and economic one at the same time. So to your point, the counties bring in less money than they have in the past. On top of that, there's lower enrollments for the schools. So like this, I imagine the county views those headcount reductions in the district as sort of not an easy choice, but an obvious choice from their perspective. How do you sort of work with them to have them understand which roles or what sort of capabilities need to be preserved versus which ones can actually be reduced?
So going back to the county budget, pretty much every county, like in the state and any other state, usually your 85 to 90% of your expenses are going into the personnel. So it's a huge chunk of everybody's budget. So if you don't cut personnel, you're not going to offset any other costs. And it gets to the point that you cannot cut any more personnel and you have to consolidate schools just so that you can actually keep providing those different options for the children. And every year it's really different when we look at cuts. You just that song and a dance that you have to do. Just take a look at each school, take a look at the enrollment numbers, and make sure that you're complying with the law. Just because with elementary schools you have class sizes and you have ECAS that you have to consider to make sure that our classes are adequately staffed. Of course, when you go into secondary schools, you have to make sure your core subjects are covered, but you also have some electives that your children can enjoy. And in secondary schools, we have to rely a lot on the virtual school offerings for our students. So if it's an AP physics class that the student has to take or wants to take, we explore virtual options. And the state of West Virginia they have the virtual school. So they for those things. And we are really thankful for those offerings because otherwise students in my county would not be able to enjoy those higher level classes or some singleton classes that we cannot provide. For example, if somebody wants to be a vet, what can we take just to help them get acquainted with the profession as it is? So virtual offerings are always very important and very much needed just because it helps us offset some of those costs with the personnel. We invest into the virtual school facilitators at each one of my high schools so that we can provide the students with supports because even if you offer a virtual class for a student, I mean, they're 16, 17-year-olds, they're still
Right.
not in a place where they could just sit down and really do this independently. Even as adults, all of us have procrastinated. A lot of time and did the homework right there, day off or the night off. Just that's what we kind of understand about our students. They need all the supports that we can get. And we do rely on partnerships with the with the West Virginia Department of Education and also local colleges. So for our dual credit offerings, we do have very good relationships with local colleges. And that's, of course, again, trying to get those virtual classes offered so that our students can have those things in place. So for every school, it does become different. But again, we have to be mindful of, are we cutting too many people that it's not even safe in our schools? And we have not done that. We always take principal feedback into consideration and help them we have our own kind of ideas in mind of which position we can cut, but principals are a vital part of making sure we get their feedback and because they see how school functions on a daily basis and what they can kind of twist a little bit to make sure our students get what they need.
So you mentioned it earlier in the conversation around school consolidation, and you're not the only one who sort of is thinking about that. I think the conversation I had with multiple superintendents in West Virginia when we were all together about a month ago, a little over a month ago, was a lot of superintendents are sort of figuring this out. But I imagine that comes with its own tensions, right? Because like the local communities have built up loyalties or affiliations or familiarity with certain schools. And so they're like, they may get it at an intellectual level, but they're like, well, not my school. Like, go close down the other person's school. How, if you don't mind me asking, like, how does one navigate that? Like, that just feels so challenging. Once again, there's no winners, right?
No.
And and so what does that look like?
Well,
What's the
we
course?
just actually opened a new school. We consolidated 3 elementaries into one big elementary school because our buildings were even less than 50% utilized, which meant that we
Uh,
had few offerings for students. We had to have split classes, which is never, the the best option. Even with the most experienced teachers, it's just a tremendous daily challenge. How do you meet the needs of both groups? And it took a long time, and it's a very contentious process because, as you know, these are community schools. Communities flourish around the schools, and especially in our district that is just so economically challenged. Usually those economies flourish around schools. So you don't take only the school out of the community, you take just its progress, and it's just the hub of different services. So the biggest thing that we had to keep on capitalizing on was that if your school is 50% utilized, then you have to have split grades. You also have to have substitutes because we run around 12-14% vacancies rate. And it's just, even though we cut teachers and service personnel every single year, that percentage of the vacancies does not change. So it just tells you that this is the issue that we just have to keep fighting. So one of the things with consolidation is you are able to actually have certified teachers in place and avoid split classes so that your students get what they need. And that's the only thing that you can keep on promoting to the communities, because you're taking their school, you're taking those close-knit relationships, because with small environments, teachers can do a lot more just because they know the families, they know the students, and they can just kind of work together to make it all better. With the bigger school, it is a challenge because you have a different environment. You have, like in our case, you merged 3 schools together. 3 schools with very distinct cultures and very distinct approaches to the way things were done. So we are still consolidating, and it will be probably another year until we start kind of seeing the unified front with the school. Keep on thinking long term, what are the best educational outcomes for our students? And when you have substitutes, split classes, no access to even just things like music and art, like, you are disadvantaging students. And sometimes that's one answer, is to consolidate, to make sure you have those resources on hand. And as a county with not much to begin with, it's our best way to offer that for our students and make that compatible, on the level with other counties.
what are you seeing when it comes to like, is there like a stabilization point that you all are seeing potentially around the corner? Like, is it like we're going to consolidate and do this, and but like at some point we see this leveling off, or is there it's like this might be like the new normal type thing? And also, and I guess related to that, I imagine your educators, your teachers, your paraprofessionals, and other people are probably like, this is incredibly disruptive for them, I'm sure. How do you sort of keep them motivated and keep them engaged and keep them retained in this world?
So as the county, we have seen population drop throughout every year. So I've just been looking at the numbers, and I think it's almost like 16,000 population here, and it's playing down 3,000 since 2015. So the population keeps on going down. Looking at the births, you have around 150 births toward, in comparison to 300 deaths. We don't have as much of a younger population, so the school age population keeps on shrinking. And if you look at the research on just from West Virginia University on the population decline, you have those declines, and they're projecting to have those declines going on for the whole state, because more people are dying than people being born, and there are people moving into the state, but not at the rate that's can catch up with that birth to death ratio. So we probably will see similar trends going on with our school district, and probably for the rest of, like, again, I think it's Berkeley and Jefferson that are seeing increases in enrollment. Everybody else is seeing decreases, which are not only just the exodus of population, but it's also school choice. You have different options. You have charter schools, you have private schools, you have micro schools, micro pods, homeschooling. And so those school choice options are also adding to the population drop in the public schools. So it just becomes a perfect storm of just all these different factors coming down, and you have to keep on being flexible to make sure that even though the population is going down, how do you still keep on adding those quality offerings to the students? And it will probably, I know the Washington State Legislature is looking at the school aid funding formula because it has not been updated in a long, long time. Different other states, like, Tennessee, they have done some changes to the formula, and that formula really needs to be looked at just so that we can be competitive with not only other school choice options, but with the other states. And there have been some studies done on just the funding does make a difference. Funding does affect quality of education, and we see it every day in our school district. So, but beyond just cutting personnel every year and just consolidating schools, there are not really too many options. And then you have to keep on thinking, like, where does it go? Like, when we get to a certain number of students, how do you still keep schools open? How do you provide those educational options? Because even if you lose students, you still have students in just across the county, and the county is vast, and it's very mountainous, so you cannot get to places quicker. So if you just keep on consolidating to the point that you have one K-12 campus, it would mean that it's a 2-hour drive for some students, which just cannot happen. So do you lose students to other counties? We live very close to Virginia. Do we lose students to another state just because it's closer? Because they live close to the border. So these are the questions that are, like, you try not to think about the answers to, because you know that it will be detrimental to the student education. Even though it might be the best fiscally possible decision to make. But at some point, if you keep on losing student population at that rate, you have to start thinking about some unconventional approaches to student education. And at this point, I don't have the answer.
Yeah, no. And further reason why I'm pushing on these topics is that I don't think anyone does, right? I don't think if you look at a lot of rural America today, or economically disadvantaged America today, a couple things seem to be true. One is the school district is often the biggest employer in that community, right?
Yeah.
Two, the community is experiencing economic and oftentimes population decline, which means that there's a huge amount of stress on the school district, and so it becomes like compounding vicious cycle, right? And I don't know if anybody really has a great solution yet and it's probably not just one thing. It probably requires legislative review of the funding model. There needs to be more like robust ways to encourage people to stick around. So like maybe it's like a greater emphasis on vocational programs or BTE or other things that encourages students to find careers that don't require them to leave the community in order to get a good paying job. But then you also need to get teachers who are willing to come. So like grow your own programs and all these other things. It will likely require a multifaceted sort of approach.
Absolutely.
So the question.
Yeah. And that's one of my goals as a superintendent. How do we keep on bringing quality teachers to the district? Because we all know teachers are number one variable affecting student achievement.
Yes.
For the second one, but we have a grow your own program in our district, and it's been in its probably 5th year of implementation. So we are about to see the fruits of our labor, and we are really selective about who we accept into the program. We want the best and the brightest, because if you look at the setup of educational supports in other countries, just look at Taiwan, they pick the best and the brightest. Of course, they pay them well, but because you pick a higher quality personnel, then you educate them. Of course, we And we pick the high school students who can handle college work and can handle high school work, because they get out of our district with 38, 40 credits and college credits, and they can start college as sophomores. And that's of course, they don't have to pay for it. So the HEPC in West Virginia picks up the cost for those early enrollment classes. And if we have to ever pitch in for the books of the district, we do that, because we all know that the families don't have that money to support the students. But we want to get that big portion. We want, it's a very selective process. We try to get the students who they want to come back, they want to give back, they want to give back to their community by education. And of course, some, they choose not to go into education after they graduate, but at least I know we contributed to them exploring that higher education, because before they would not have even thought about this. So I'm just thinking it's still helping the kid to get a good footing and do something great with their life. But we have a few that are ready to come back, and it's just my teachers are even commenting on how this is a good quality individual, and the principals are just very excited to have them in their classrooms. And this is what I'm really capitalizing on: people who we have invested in as a district, who are they love teaching, they consider teaching as their vocation. Because sometimes I think and it's not only on a state but national level, when we try to fill our classrooms with teachers, sometimes going to alternative pathways, there is a different approach of a person who has chosen teaching from the very beginning, and they just think it's their calling, and somebody who sometimes, just being bluntly honest, needs a job. Teaching is not a job. Teaching is a calling, and it becomes a very tremendously challenging calling, because, when you see students coming from such diverse and challenged backgrounds, you have to be more than just a teacher. You have to be a counselor, a mental health worker, cook, you just explore these positions. But to me, teaching has to be a calling, because if it's not, then you just need to go find something else to do. And I think that Grow Your Own, this is what we capitalize on: kids who have a calling for it, who want to make a difference. It's a long-term project. It's a project that, you have to just think it's a vision. It's not just a sprint, it's a marathon that we are running here. But I think it truly can change the trajectory of our students. And my other focus is on CT education, because a lot of our students, if we have, at least for now, we have a 45% going to college rate, which has grown 20% since I started as an assistant superintendent.
That's pretty impressive, sort of the circumstances that they're coming from.
Yeah. And it's, I think, I attribute it to make sure we support our students in high school by offering those dual credit classes, because it's not only for Grow Your Own. We have our school students taking all these classes, because a lot of them are first-time college goers in their family.
Yeah.
And knowing the college world, how much it's changed, even the ones, if the parents have gone to college, they still struggle to understand the world that these students are going into. Building those relationships with local colleges and helping our students be more comfortable really helps them just say, I can do this. I can go and get college education. But of course, college education is not for everybody. And we want to make sure that our students leave the district. And I keep on telling all my administrators and teachers that there are 3 goals for them when they leave. They either need to be enrolled or employed, or they need to be enlisted. So there are 3 E's that they need to keep on focusing on. And one of those employment strategies, we need to have students leaving with some certification. So they need to have a skilled trade that they can use, or even if they want to build upon it and go to community college and add more certifications. So that's my goal, to reach the needs of at least the rest of the 55% that are not going to college. But we also, within the CTE world, we want to make sure that it's not just viewed, you just go and get a welding certificate or you get an auto certificate. With some of our programs, we also have signed articulation agreements with the colleges. So if we have students who are getting their CNA certification, they want to pursue their RN, they already will go into college with 8 credits toward their foreign experience. So we want to make sure that their opportunities for our students are open so they can have skills to be effective and to be productive whenever they graduate. And that's just one of our ways to combat the generational poverty that is at quite a high percentage here, and make sure students see I can do something that I love to do, something meaningful, and I get paid well, and I'm successful in keeping my family supported and just live a good life.
I mean, especially when you think about dual enrollment also, I mean, plays off so many different powerful forces, right? Not only is it the exposure, but also it makes college more affordable too if they do decide to go, right?
Absolutely.
It's not many mess credits they have to pay tuition for. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's incredible. I feel like we spent a lot of time today speaking about some of a lot of the challenges and problems that you're facing, and it seemed I'm glad that towards the back half of this conversation we've been able to sort of shift and sort of talk about some of the solutions and things that you are putting in place. Along those lines, I mean, are there a couple like unexpected, you said you're about 3 years in right now, superintendent, unexpected bright spots of things that are actually doing better than you expected given all the challenges that you're facing? You knew all the challenges going in. You weren't blind to them. As an assistant superintendent and a teacher prior in the same district, you knew what to expect. But was there anything that was pleasantly you were surprised about once you did become?
Well, I think the reason I accepted the appointment and I keep on being in this position is because I have the best people working for me. We are, as you know, you cannot just be that sole hero these days. The world is too complex and complicated to just do it by yourself. So I surround myself with people who know their jobs, who know how to do their jobs, who are just tremendously hardworking. And it's my team in the central office. My principals are the best. I have the best teachers because you have to have a heart to work in this environment where you do see more challenges. Before we get to play school, we have to do so much more. You have to think about behaviors. You have to think about your culture and climate. You have to make sure that they're fed, that they're clothed. Times we need to make sure that we educate and grow our families, just because, again, if we don't support them, we will not be able to get more out of it. So that continues to be the bright spot because you do have the best people. Our bus drivers are, dedicated. They drive the roads that are, I don't know if I would sometimes drive because they're just so mountainous and twisted and curved, but they will get those students back home no matter what. They work as a team. We have done a lot of supports for our ECATs and for our especially teachers in the early learning grades to make sure that we approach our education with systematic structures, especially knowing that we will have some inexperienced teachers. We made sure that we are putting structures in, and with science of reading kind of getting steam, getting some traction in the recent years just across the nation. We started that work 8-9 years ago, because we knew when you have a child coming from generational poverty, from parents who either work a lot or they just don't have the skill to keep on pushing children, talking to them, using that vocabulary that needs to be used at higher levels, just so that they can come to school ready to learn to read. We have students coming in behind. So we have to make sure once they get to school that we really hit them with good systematic instruction. So we realized that way before, everybody else started pushing that science of reading, because we knew if we don't do something like this, we're just going to keep on seeing those abysmal scores. We have been seeing growth in our reading achievement on a summative assessment for a while. Like last year, we were hit with tremendous floods in February. So we had to miss 3 weeks of school just because of the floods. So when you accounted for everything else, we missed around 30 days of school overall last year. And we still showed 2% growth on reading achievement. And it just is a testament to our teachers just hitting the ground running and making sure the instructional time was really spent wisely, that we were not wasting precious minutes. We just had to make sure our students get what they need, because again, we don't get do-overs for students, right? Like they're just in that second grade 1 year, in the third grade, they're just that 1 year. We cannot, like, the weather can throw all kinds of punches and all kinds of other things can come up. But again, we don't get for the students to repeat that year. We have to make sure they have the skills to be able to go on to the next grade. So that was, again, that looking at that achievement, that trajectory was just promising. It's very just a bright spot. Also, and again, that's invention is just a matter of necessity, so to say. Having those wraparound supports for students, just having systems in place with counselors. We have mental health organizations that we partner with. We have school-based clinics we partner with. We have mobile dentists coming in. So those structures are in place and work seamlessly so that we can, again, get the students where we need. We also are a community schools district, so we have community schools facilitators in every single school. And those are the ones that make sure the students we have, if they need something, if they need food for the weekend, if they need socks, if they need clothes, their family needs some supports, those people know we need to make sure that this child does not go without. So all these systems are so connected, and probably in other districts, you don't see that support to that extent. And again, because we needed to make sure that we give these wraparound supports to students so that when they get to the classroom, they don't have to think battling the toothache that will never go away, or, not be seen by a doctor. Like, we have, as much as we can, we have that covered.
I guess I'll end this with saying thank you for everything that you're doing and that your team is doing, and we wishing you all the best with everything. I think it's you definitely have a handful of very significant challenges, but it sounds like you all are approaching it with a lot of positivity and a lot of solution orientation. So I appreciate that for you, and wish you all the best.
Thank you. Well, kids deserve, regardless of the zip code, they deserve good education, because that's what got me be successful. It just said that I was, poor and not much food toward the end of the month, but I had, my parents cared, my teachers cared, and I was just pushed to do the best. That's why I just think our children deserve those champions, the adults that will push for them. And again, regardless of zip code, they deserve good education.
100%. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for listening to Praxis Journeys. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And if you know someone who'd find this conversation helpful, feel free to share it with them. I'm Vinay Ganti, and until next time, keep learning, keep leading, and keep working toward the kind of change our students deserve.